and welcome back to the show called Mortgage Talk and More. I'm your host, Mark Hairston, and I'm really excited to have a guest on who I really met recently, but I've seen his name around quite a bit in the mortgage world, provide insurance for clients, and he comes highly recommended to me. As a matter of fact, we are in the process of reviewing my personal insurance. We're going to talk a little bit about that, because I want the show to be all about me, okay?
Of course, as it should be.
As it should be. But my new friend is Rhys Malin, and it's spelled R-H-Y-S. We're just talking about that a minute ago because I couldn't pronounce it, but it's Rhys, like R-E-S.
Right. Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom. and Rhys is with Goosehead Insurance.
Correct.
And I want to take a minute or two to talk about your experience, you know, kind of where you grew up, how you got the insurance business, and what you're doing now.
Yeah. I think in terms of an insurance story, I think it's actually pretty good. I mean, it's a good business story, I think. I started out, I was waiting tables after graduating from college. I was working at
LSU?
LSU.
I recall.
Right. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
That's right. And so I was waiting tables for a while and ended up becoming a concierge when I was like 25 years old, 26 years old. And when I was about 27, I realized like I can't do this forever. I got to do something, you know, and I ultimately, long story short, ended up, deciding to go back and get my MBA because I needed to do something in business. I wanted to do something in business, but, you know, I didn't want to be working at the hotel while I was getting my MBA. Yeah. And I figured, you know, I needed to get into business, and what's the best place to get into business? You got to start from the bottom because you need to know how, you know, it grows, right? So you need to be in. So I was like, you know what, let me get into sales. And the very first job that I ever applied to, when I made this decision, was a local State Farm agency in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Okay.
Shout out to Lauren Meyer State Farm.
All right.
And so she hired me, and, you know, interestingly enough, I told her, you know, I was going to be doing this professional MBA program. It's going to take 2 years. You know, it's done out for professionals, you know, work during the day, go to school twice a week. And you can get your MBA in about 2 years. And I told her, I can give you 2 years. I can promise you 2 years. And then it turned into 6.
Okay.
Yeah. So I really fell into it. I really enjoyed it. It was, you know, I felt like I was really good at it. And ultimately, about 6 years in, I decided to open up my own insurance agency. And, you know, my family kind of brought me here to Texas, so to speak, to Austin. That's right. And ultimately, you know, I discovered this whole Goosehead thing. And, you know, the difference, you know, is State Farm is what we call a captive insurance carrier, where that agency only offers State Farm insurance product. Okay. And so, you know, there's benefits to it, of course, name brand recognition, but there's pros and cons for everything. Right? Sure. But however, Goosehead Insurance is an agency brokerage, an independent insurance agency brokerage. So I'm not tied to one particular company. I can shop in people's insurance rates. You know, made it a lot more competitive, and it honestly is just the best way to, you know, sell insurance. And so I opened up my agency here in Austin, Texas in March of 2019. I just had my 5th anniversary.
5th anniversary. Well, congratulations on
Thanks
that.
so much. Appreciate
it. It's akin to what I do in the mortgage business because I'm a broker too. You know, there's captive loan officers like with Fairway or Supreme Lending or whatever. There's a lot of different mortgage companies out there, but as a broker, I have more flexibility for my customers and product and pricing and all sorts of reasons, you know, that I do the same thing on my end. So that's why I wanted you to look at my insurance because, you know, we talked about before the show. I've always thought this, to be honest with you, that insurance is complicated.
Very complicated.
It's complicated and detailed.
Very detailed.
And it, you know, I don't sit there and read those policies.
Most people don't.
If I did, I couldn't even understand them. So I need a competent consultant to help me. You know, I've got 3 properties, 2 rentals, 1 is a condo, 3 cars, umbrella policies, all that sort of thing.
Right.
So, so we want to talk a little bit about, you know, what your specialty is. I think it's what they call property casualty. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So personal lines insurance. So primarily is what I do. So home insurance, auto insurance, like your situation, you know, landlord investment properties, RVs. We can insure, you know, classic vehicles. You know, specialty policy writers like, you know, personal articles, policies and floaters and things for like your jewelry and et cetera, and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So basically, you know, if it can be insured and you own it, like we can insure it.
Yeah.
I primarily don't do commercial insurance. I more like to stay on the personal side.
Property casualty. Yeah. And when you called me earlier in the week, about one of my properties in an area called Lost Creek that we have as a rental, and we have these very large trees in the front yard.
Right.
And you mentioned to me that I didn't know that the tree may affect the policies or something like that.
Yeah. One of the biggest contributors for losses and claims is, as we know, wind damage, right? That's the number one cause of loss across the United States is wind and hail related damage.
Okay.
And a big contributor to that wind and hail damages is tree limbs falling on your roof. And, a gust of wind comes by.
Or maybe the neighbor's roof.
But that's
close.
That's a very good question. If you want to ask me that question, like because that's a very common question, who would be at fault in that kind of a thing? Like I can answer that question.
Yeah.
But in terms of like wind related damage, if you've got tree limbs over your roof, if there's a windstorm or, a tornado or something like that comes by and that tree limb falls on your roof, then it's going to be a claim and the insurance company is going to be paying out money to repair. And so, more and more lately, insurance companies are paying attention to tree limbs that are over the roof line and being a little bit more restrictive about that kind of a thing, because, they're looking at the risk, right? They're looking at, what's the risk and what's the chances that they're going to have to pay out a claim. And if there's a thick tree limb that's over your roof, then there's an increased risk that could potentially lead to a loss.
And I'm getting a lot of feedback from clients, as an example. We talked about this last week as well, and you were sharing with me some of the reasons that, as an example, homeowner costs have gone up so much in the last couple of years, and why people should really be shopping their insurance, because if they don't pay attention to it, it can get out of hand.
For sure.
When I'm estimating insurance costs for a mortgage loan, I want to make sure I'm accurate as best I can be, not being an insurance person, So talk a little bit about why people are seeing such a crazy increase in homeowners particularly.
Wow. So honestly, well, for one thing, there's an increase, a gradual increase in claim severity and frequency due to weather events.
In Texas?
Well, it's
around the country.
Kind of the nature all around the country, but especially here in Texas, because if you go and you look at a jet stream map, that jet stream kind of dips and it kind of comes down. Go back to 2021 when we had snowpocalypse, as everyone calls it here in Texas, and that big gusts of Arctic wind came down, right? And that's kind of where a lot of that wind comes from, and it ultimately can produce, the snowstorm that we had in 21 or hailstorms like we had earlier this week, in fact.
Well, I live in Lakeway now, and we've been out there about 5 years.
Did you guys have any damage from?
I'm not sure we had any damage yet, but we've had 2 hailstorms in like the last 2 weeks.
Right.
And they haven't been what I say major. They didn't last very long, but they were pretty bad. Yeah. And I was like, wow, So we have not had our roofs checked.
You could get them checked. I think that's one of the things that I think people do that they shouldn't do really is because, and it's part of the benefit that I provide as an agent, right, is providing kind of an insurance advisory role, right? People often call me up and say, hey, we had the hailstorm that came through. Should I call my insurance company and see if it's covered or if I should have that roof replaced?
Right.
The answer to that question I usually tell them is, well, you can do that, but you might also choose to call a roofer first. Have your roof checked out first before filing that insurance claim. And the reason being is because insurance companies look at your claims record regardless of whether or not a claim was paid. So you can actually have a claim on your record with a $0 payout, and it still affects your insurance.
I didn't know that either.
Exactly.
See, I didn't know that.
I think a lot of people don't know that. And then I can't tell you how many times I would see someone have a claim on their record and it's a $0 payout because there wasn't any damage to the roof enough to pay out a claim. And unfortunately, those things can, if you have too many of those, and number one, you could be paying a lot more.
Even weather-related stuff?
Even weather-related stuff, yes. If you have more than, many insurance carriers have generally a rule of about 2 claims within 3 years. So if you have a hail claim and you call the insurance company, they don't pay anything. And then you have another claim that actually pays out something, then it might be difficult for you to find an affordable insurance policy after that.
Well, my experience with roofers, as they should, they want to sell roofs,
Of course.
and they want to replace roofs. And so it'd be good to have a good roofer, and I can recommend
100%.
some of those guys for sure. But
Absolutely.
at the same time, if they feel that there needs to be replaced, there's still an argument, if you will,
Yes.
with the insurance company.
Correct.
They're still going to go and verify that.
It's a good idea to have the roofer there when the claims adjuster arrives, so that they can talk.
So
to
they
each
can
other.
talk about it specifically.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And having said that, are there certain companies, like in the mortgage business, as an example, some companies like VA loans better than others, if you will, or FHA loans, low credit, that sort of thing. In your world, as far as claims, are there some carriers that you feel are better than others as far as paying claims, or are they all about the same?
I don't. Where my position is, I don't get a lot of that feedback. I think that's a good question for a roofer to ask a particular roofer. They might know because they're dealing on the claim side. I don't end up getting a lot of feedback on the claim side.
Got it.
But I think what's important, and this is in general with claims period, is not just specifically with a roof. Well, with a roof, the most important thing that you want to make sure that you can get is replacement cost on your roof.
Okay.
Number one.
Okay.
So anytime that you buy a home insurance policy, you want to ask if that policy has replacement cost value on the roof. Okay. Because the alternative is actual cash value, or what they call a roof systems repayment schedule, is a technical term, right? Because insurance is incredibly technical, right? We were talking about that a second ago.
What do you call it, a legal contract?
Yes.
You call it something you want to.
Well, insurance is a legal contract.
Yeah.
That's sure what it is, and it's not a tangible. You can't feel it or anything like that. Sure, you got the piece of paper, but essentially it's a contract that it's an agreement that both parties are going to abide by that contract. And so there's a provision when it comes to the roof of a replacement cost value, or there could be this endorsement on the policy called the roof systems repayment schedule, which pays based on the age of the roof. So if you have like a 10-year-old roof and it gets hit by hail and it needs to be replaced, if you have that actual cash value or a roof system schedule, they might only pay you 65% or 70% of the value of that roof. And then when you subtract your deductible, they may be paying less than 50% of the value of that roof. So it's important to know that. But unfortunately, more and more companies are saying that you cannot have replacement cost on your roof if your roof is older than 10 or 15 years. A lot of the times these days, it's becoming more and more of a trend, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah. Even in conversation with you this week, you asked me about one of the properties about the age of the roof.
Right. Yeah.
And I wasn't sure, but you were able to find out.
Yeah, the age of the roof on your home is probably one of the biggest factors to determine not only whether you're what you pay for your insurance, but also whether or not you're eligible with a particular carrier. Because there might be an insurance company, or we call them carriers in the business, that are more competitively priced than others.
Sure.
And they may put in provisions saying that they will only insure your roof if it is up to a certain age.
Okay.
And that's it. And then you don't, but if your roof is older than that, they won't insure you and they can't offer you that competitive priced policy. So, but these days with the frequency of hailstorms that we're getting, I think the average age of a roof especially in North Austin is a few years old. Yeah.
Right.
It's definitely one of those factors that really impacts how much you pay for insurance.
And if somebody's buying an older home, let's say, and that I refer you to get the insurance.
Sure.
The roof is a big part of that conversation,
yes,
I assume.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it's important to know how old the roof is, but a lot of the times people don't know. I mean, you buy a house that was.
How would you know?
Well, let's say, for example, someone, because it happens all the time here in Austin, there's, people that flipping homes is a big business in Austin. And so, that flipper had bought the home from the previous homeowner who was living in the house for 20 years or something like that. And then they turn around and sell it to you. Well, the seller's disclosure might not have the age of the roof because the seller doesn't know, because they've only owned it for 6 months or whatever. Right. So, thankfully, there's some insurance carriers out there that have satellite imagery that kind of go back, years, as much as, 10 years.
Wow.
So we can, I can utilize that resource to, kind of get an idea of how old that roof is, or sometimes even Google Street View, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Sometimes pull up the Google Street View, you drop your little guy right there on the street, and you go. There's a little button that kind of shows you the last times that the Google Maps car drove by the house.
Very cool.
And you can see when that roof was last replaced, or get an idea of that.
Now, we did have hail damage on that Lost Creek property a few years ago. We replaced it with a metal roof. Now, we paid the difference, the delta between what we got from the insurance company and the cost.
Sure.
Is that a benefit? We did it primarily for aesthetics, for a look. But as far as insurance, is that a good thing or a bad thing, or it's hard to say?
I mean, there's pros and cons.
Yeah.
There are some insurance companies that don't want to insure metal roofs.
Oh,
yeah, weirdly enough. But also the age of the metal roof certainly does matter. Of course, everyone knows that a metal roof can generally last longer.
Okay.
And be a bit more resistant to hail than a shingle roof might. And insurance companies, by and large, do typically understand that. So they're usually, on average, willing to be more accepting of an older metal roof, but it still needs to be in good condition. It still needs to be not rusted and filled with holes.
Right.
So, but it can be a benefit.
Let's shift a little bit to liability,
Sure,
because that's something a lot of people don't think about either.
Right.
When we were living in this particular home, we had a big swing in the front yard. When my grandkids were little, we'd swing them around. It was actually in the front yard, so sometimes we'd look out and see kids coming on our swing, that weren't invited, if you will.
Yes.
And then we decided to lease it out. We decided to take that swing down because somebody said, "Hey, that's a liability," and which somebody
Very
really
well
didn't
could
think
be.
about per se.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about
example
of that sort of thing.
So I'll give you my favorite example. You're going to like this because I believe your neighborhood is on a golf course, right?
There is a golf course
nearby.
Yes,
right? Okay.
Nearby.
So are you a golfer? Do you golf any?
Poorly. I wasn't invited to
like
the Masters
me.
this week
Yeah,
to play
right.
in the Masters.
Yeah, my favorite way to play golf is with others, to play best ball.
Yeah, that's right.
Let me hit from where you.
I'm a very good putter, is what I am.
Yeah, my mid game is actually not bad. Actually,
that's right.
Okay, so my favorite example is this because as someone who is as terrible as we are, you're gonna shank the ball and it's gonna slice it really bad, or maybe you hook it.
Right.
And
there's no hook in my game. It's all
slice. Yeah, same. I grew up playing baseball, so my wrist twist. But okay, say for example, you are teeing off and you slice the heck out of that ball, and it hits somebody in the face.
Okay.
So they're gonna sue you.
Okay.
They're gonna go to the hospital, of course, because this is a real life example that has been shared with me. A client of a colleague of mine had that exact thing happen. They hit their golf ball and it ended up hitting someone, and that person had to have reconstructive surgery.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, reconstructive surgery. They were disfigured.
Yeah.
And they sued them. And so
I may sue them too.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. So that question becomes like, okay, where is the coverage for something like that? Like if you accidentally or unintentionally cause damage to anyone or anything anywhere in the United States, and a lawsuit is brought against you for your negligence, in that case, where is your coverage? And it's in your home insurance.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So it's a really good idea to have as much liability coverage on your home insurance as possible.
What's the maximum you can get?
Well, there are some insurance carriers that'll do $1 million, but most insurance carriers will cap out at 500,000.
Okay.
And if
then we get the umbrella policy.
If you feel like the total value of your assets, my general rule of thumb is, and I tell people this all the time, is if the total value of your asset portfolio is coming up to or exceeds $1 million, it's a good idea to have a liability policy, an umbrella policy. Usually $1 million or $2 million,
and they're fairly
$3
cheap.
million. They're incredibly cheap.
Yeah.
It's a lot cheaper to buy umbrella liability than it is to buy, car insurance liability. In fact,
when you gave this golf example, it reminded me of my middle son, who's now 35, but so he plays quite a bit of golf.
Yeah.
But a friend of his hit him and broke his collarbone.
Wow.
With a golf ball.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't think he ever sued him, but he certainly was hurt.
Yeah,
for a while.
he would have cause, I would think. Now, I'm not an attorney, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I would imagine that he would have a reason to file a claim against this person.
I hit a dog one time with a golf ball.
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry for the dog.
Sparky, oh my God. Oh gosh. I hope you can't. I hope you went home and prayed
I
for the
did.
dog,
Yeah,
for the
the
well-being
dog
of the dog.
lived for
Okay,
sure.
good. Glad to hear that.
So let's we talked a little before the show about an example. Let's shift a little bit to auto insurance.
Sure, absolutely.
Because obviously most people that are going to be listening have car insurance as well, and that's expensive
you
too.
have to
and
here
you're
in Austin.
going to save me some money on that for sure. But I was telling you, I was at a party a couple months ago at a friend's house, and because there's so many people, the parking was kind of tight. And the next morning when I saw my car in the driveway, because when I left, it was dark. There was my rear driver's side was beat in pretty good.
Sure.
It wasn't just smashed in, but it was clearly a problem. And I had no idea who would have hit me, And so I reached out to my buddy, had the party, and he put it out an email, said, "Hey, Mark's car was hit. Anybody have an idea of what, anybody want to stand up and take responsibility?" And a friend of mine did, who I didn't know his truck was next to me, but he said, "Yeah, Mark, I think I probably am the guilty party." So that would be called a collision, correct?
Generally, yes. I mean, there's certain situations where uninsured motorist property damage might apply, but
because his insurance took care of it.
That's good.
We filed on him. Didn't cost me a thing.
It
cost me some time.
Right.
Because I had to go rent a car.
You're incredibly lucky, I think, that someone stood up and took ownership of it. But 99% of the time, that's not going to happen.
Right.
Someone is going to hit your
HEB
car
or something,
exactly,
or a restaurant, and they just leave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is that as I was saying earlier, you kind of have to have evidence a lot of the times in order to convince an insurance, because we were talking about a second ago, like insurance is a contract,
right?
And so it's all contract law. And a lot of the times when you're filing a claim, what you're kind of technically doing is you're sort of kind of suing the insurance company, to for them to fulfill their part of the contract.
Yeah.
Right. So imagine if you were in a court of law and you were taking, that insurance company to court for them to force them to do their part of that they agreed to do.
Sure.
In the policy, in the contract. And so, on a micro scale, that's kind of what you're doing. So the thing is just like in a court of law, there's often a burden of proof. And so, I tell that people all the time is like, if you're involved in like let's say there's a collision at an intersection, right? You pull up to a stop sign and you stop your car and the other guy doesn't, right?
Got it.
And you would, swear on your life that the other guy ran the stop sign, but so is he. He's going to say the same thing.
Right.
And then it becomes a he said, she said kind of an argument. And honestly, the person who has the most evidence will typically win. And so, for example, this is why people buy dash cameras in their car. So that I have one in my car. I think it's a good idea.
It's a good idea
for you to have one as well, because those kinds of situations happen all the time.
Yeah, they do.
And unfortunately, an insurance company, for the most part, they might take your word for it, but they're still going to want to get evidence, that whole trust but verify kind of a thing, And so, if you and everyone else were saying, oh no, like someone like hit my car in a parking lot, and if every single insurance company handled that as if, they took their word for it, there would be people, lying about
all the time,
claims all the time.
Yeah.
And, it wouldn't be affecting people's insurance premiums as much as in, say, an at-fault collision. So what they will do is typically want to get some kind of evidence, because, it's happens quite frequently where someone will try to, they'll back into something and hit something, but then they'll go to the insurance company and say, someone hit me.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because insurance premium costs are rising and losses are compounding on top, every single year, they have to sometimes collect more evidence. Otherwise, they're going to just assume that it was an at-fault collision instead.
Now, another example around that could be, let's say you have it's not called an amendment. Let's say jewelry, an endorsement. You want to endorse your homeowner's policy to cover, let's say, a wedding ring of $25,000.
Right.
Now, the typical policy, as I recall, has around $5,000 coverage.
Less than
jewelry.
that.
It's less than that.
Yeah, it can sometimes be as little as $1,500.
And you talked about collectibles like guns.
For sure.
My 15-year-old grandson probably has 20 guns. I mean, he's a avid gun collector. Now he doesn't have the policy, but his parents do. So tell me what should they be doing around that?
Well,
or jewelry?
Well, yeah. So you can do like I know time. Time flies when you're having fun talking about insurance. What can I say? I'm telling you, it's actually, when you think about it, it's actually kind of fascinating stuff. I'm telling you, like people talking about,
we have to do this again.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come back for sure. I mean, like
before we sign off, which is about a minute from now,
right?
Make sure people know how to get a hold of you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You spelled my name correctly from the very beginning. I'll remind people it's RHYS. So RHYS. My last name is Malen, Malen. And my company is Goosehead, goose like the bird, and head like, Goosehead.
Right.
And if you just Google Reese Malin Goosehead, you'll pop up. I'll be the first name that pops up. Absolutely. You'll see my website.
Do you have an office here in Austin?
I do have an office here in Austin. That's right. Yeah. I'm local to Austin. But I serve all over Texas. So anybody who's listening to here in Texas can give me a call, reach out to me. Happy to help them out. You go onto my website, you'll see my over 200 5-star reviews.
200.
Oh yeah, I told you I've been doing this for 5 years, and
dang.
I've got nearly 1,000 clients that I'm helping right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
I know. So
they'd
be happy to reach out.
We're still kind of in a conversation about my stuff because I got to make some changes.
We got 14 questions on the list here, so I guess we're gonna have to come back.
Come back again. We've only covered like 3 or 4.
I'm telling you, insurance is a fascinating subject.
It really is. It's not something I think about a lot until you need it.
I hope I hope the people that were listening here today, had their positions changed and how interesting insurance was. Hopefully they didn't turn off when you said that we were talking about insurance, and they're still listening today.
All right, Reese, great to be with you.
Pleasure.
Man.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Thanks.